Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1054, written by Fullbeat6784. When a Ring Goes Rogue, a story of salt and mystery. Hello. A lot of my glitch stories are from quite a long time ago, and I don't want to risk misremembering or misrepresenting anything. This one happened very recently though. I have this gold ring I got about 8 years ago. It's a thin little scalloped rose gold band that is easy to wear and that I absolutely adore and that I never ever remove. In the 8 years of having it, I've removed it twice, once when I had an MRI in 2021 and the same week again when I had surgery, and every single piece of jewelry had to be removed for the procedures. Afterwards, I stopped wearing all of my other jewelry, like the many layered necklaces I used to keep around. It was just this one ring, and one little blue stud I wear on my right ear. Seriously, the second I was out of surgery, I was asking for my ring back because it comforts me to have it on. Now, as has happened to a few people during the pandemic and lockdown, I gained a bit of weight. Not so much that I had to remove the ring altogether, but enough that I would have to scrub with a decent amount of soap and warm water to pry it off. All that to say is that this ring stays on very snugly. Last month, I went on a trip with my friends to Mexico, and I had quite a few drinks one night, and I came back home to take a nice long soapy shower. A few days later, when I got home, I realized that my ring was missing. I was quite upset about it, since I love it, but I couldn't do much because I assumed it had fallen off when I had been scrubbing the day off of me in the shower I took, so fine. Nothing to do, not until the next time I head back to the same exact spot in Mexico and ask the nice Airbnb owner to let me search the shower, right? A couple of days ago, I was making dinner at my parents' house, not even my house, and when I cook, I always use a special fancy salt that I love because I'm pretentious like that, but we had completely run out. I asked my mom where her table salt was, and she, also someone who never uses it, wasn't sure, so she said just to hunt around the cabinets. I found an almost finished container of salt at the back of the pantry, one that has tiny salt holes in it unless you screw the entire top off, and the top had probably only been taken off once, long ago when it was first bought, to remove that layer of foam and paper that protects the opening. I went to go salt something, and guess what I found sitting inside the box? I have never once touched that box of salt, never opened it, always used my salt. There isn't even a hole big enough in it for the ring to get inside. Even if I had been the one to open the salt for the first time, it would have to have been months and months ago because the container is almost finished, and I don't usually cook at my parents' place. Plus, I was still wearing the ring as recently as late February. I have no idea how this happened, and it's just been sitting with me and making me laugh since it happened. Luckily, this wasn't a scary glitch, but it feels odd to think that I may have just lost a moment of time somewhere or somehow. This is why the story sticks out so much to me, because I don't reach for anything else. I really love this particular grinder. I keep this with the pepper grinder right next to the stove at my parents' house and would have no reason to pick a very old-looking bottle of salt that I didn't even know the location of. The only other salt I use is Morton's, if I have to use heaps to salt pasta water, or stocks or broth, and that has a tiny little metal nozzle and no discernible way to even open it except the metal nozzle. Okay, I guess this ring in the salt jar actually perturbed me a little bit more than I originally released. It's inexplicable. Case notes for file 1054. When a Ring Goes Rogue, a story of salt and mystery. Curious that it would be salt. It's like the universe is trying to tell you that it was a glitch baked from within, as spirits wouldn't be able to interact with salt. Why place it in there otherwise? It kind of proves that it wasn't a spirit that did this. It was the universe. It can't be random either, it's just too damn specific. It has to be whoever is in charge of the universe. God, the simulation masters, whoever it is, they're doing this for some reason. They took the ring, or the ring was accidentally misplaced by the universe, and they figured, well, we have to return it. We'll just do it in a way where they think that maybe it was an accident on their part. Although, even there, it's a bit loose, why not just put it back in your own home, where you would expect that, oh, okay, maybe I just didn't take it with me to Mexico, or something like that. So I'm not sure on the reason, I just know
My gut tells me this cannot be random, and it can't be spirits, because of the salt.
Bonus file, written by Cheese and Crackers 84. The day my dead grandma protected me from a violent burglary. When I was 17, 26 now, we were burgled in broad daylight while I was at home. The robbers were armed and violent. However, nothing about that day makes any sense at all. I've been trying to work it out for the past 9 years, and the only conclusion I can draw is my dead grandma was keeping me safe. Some context. Around that time in my life, I was struggling a lot with insomnia, to the point where I needed sleeping pills to ever be able to sleep. I hadn't slept without them in about 2 years. That particular day, I arrived home from school at around 4 p.m., went into my bedroom. My bedroom was on the ground floor at the back of the house. You had to fully walk into the kitchen to even notice my bedroom door. I sat on the bed and suddenly was overcome with this deep tiredness like nothing I'd experienced in a long time. I put my head down and fell into the deepest nap I think I've ever had, with no help from sleeping pills or anything like that. Whilst I was napping, I had a very vivid dream about my grandma, who had died 2 years prior. In the dream, she was in the room with me. Her presence was so strong I could almost reach out to her. Suddenly, my phone went off and woke me up. It was my auntie, who had just come home to find the front door battered open, and the upstairs of the house and the downstairs living room and hallway had been totally turned upside down. She called as she assumed I wasn't home. She hadn't checked my bedroom. I was super disoriented when she called me, and I thought I had been asleep for hours and hours. I felt almost drunk. I was that disoriented. When I finally realized what had happened, it was only 4:20 p.m., which means somehow, in the span of 20 minutes, I managed to come home, fall into the deepest sleep of my life, and somehow not hear a single thing while the house got totally ransacked. They must have left in a hurry because they didn't check the kitchen. If they had, they would have immediately noticed my room. The next door neighbors then came over and told us they'd heard banging and crashing around. Nobody could understand how I'd been there and not woken up. It didn't and still doesn't make sense. I've always been a super light sleeper, and even if somebody tiptoes into a room, I'll immediately sense it and wake up. Unfortunately, this meant that everybody was slightly suspicious of me for a while, as it made no sense at all. But I swear to God, no matter how many times I play it over in my head, the only conclusion I can draw is that my grandma was protecting me. The burglars were later found, and it turned out they were wanted for a series of violent robberies. They had been armed with weapons and everything. When I found that out, my stomach turned. I truly believe that my deceased grandma saved my life that day.
Case notes for the bonus file. The day my dead grandma protected me from a violent burglary. Can loved ones' spiritual fragments linger behind? For various reasons, absolutely. We know that. I don't think they're able to physically fight the intruders off. I think more likely what happened is that those violent intruders didn't start just ransacking the place themselves. Why would they do that? I mean, yeah, maybe they'll move things out of the way, try to determine if there's any hiding spots, like there's a secret cache of gold and silver under the floor or something. But they would try to be somewhat quiet. I mean, unless they're absolutely stupid. Which maybe they were, but I'm going to assume that they're just normal intellect, and from that, my gut tells me here that your grandma was the one that actually moved things around, and made a whole ruckus about it, so it would both alert the neighbors, the noise, and also spook the burglars terrifyingly. You know, they're just breaking into a place looking to rob it, and then everything starts flying all over the place and things are breaking from your grandma's actions. It would freak them out, and yeah. The robbers were later caught, you mentioned that, but I don't think that means that they would spill the beans on it, try to claim the insanity plea by saying that the house they robbed was damaged by a ghost. They would just keep their mouth shut on that, and they may not even believe it happened themselves, even though they saw it. That's what I think happened. So yes, your grandma did protect you, and that's beautiful. Now time for the quote of the day. The greatest mistake you can ever make is being too afraid to make one. Being paralyzed by fear of failure. That's what this comes back to. And a lot of people are affected by that, sadly. It's hard to blame them. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. It's Murphy's Law, right? But even though things will probably go wrong at some point in some way, the whole point of trying and success is not to avoid failure, it's to persevere in spite of failure. until eventually you succeed, or maybe you don't, but you still challenge yourself and you're better off for it. It's like in a MMORPG where you're going out and adventuring. It's not just for the destination or the loot, but also for the experience. You're literally leveling up yourself by just trying. So don't be afraid of failure. And also know that failure is inevitable. It's that one TNG episode where Picard is telling Data where he can't beat this intelligent but ordinary mortal, and because of that he thinks that there's a problem in his code, but in reality it's just that sometimes it's possible to make no mistakes and still fail. Isn't that a concept? There's just no winning move. That is sometimes the case, like the war games, curious game you have here, the only winning move is not to play. Of course, in this case, do play, because not winning isn't necessarily the point. I think that's the best summary.